He thought I was stupid. He regretted it instantly. I'd always been a bit of a pushover. Quiet, meticulous, and maybe a little too eager to please. It's how I ended up in accounting in the first place, buried under spreadsheets instead of pursuing my more creative dreams. But hey, a girl's gotta eat, right? The problem wasn't the work itself. I actually enjoyed the order, the precision. The problem was Mark. Mark was a senior accountant, maybe 10 or 15 years older than me. He had that kind of easy confidence that only comes with years of coasting on mediocrity. He wasn't particularly good at his job, but he was exceptionally skilled at office politics. Golfing with David, the CFO, was his specialty. From day one, Mark treated me like I was fresh out of diapers. "Just leave the hard stuff to me, Sarah," he'd say with a condescending pat on the shoulder. "You wouldn't want to strain that pretty little head of yours." Emily, my friend from the data analysis department, saw right through him. "He's threatened by you, you know," she said one afternoon during lunch. "You're smarter than he is, and he knows it." I laughed. "Please. He's been here for 15 years. I'm just the new kid." "Exactly," Emily countered. "He's got to keep you down to keep himself up. Don't let him." Easier said than done. Every time I tried to voice an opinion, Mark would interrupt, talk over me, or just outright dismiss my ideas. He'd take credit for my work in meetings, leaving me sitting there, seething silently. He even started assigning me all the most tedious tasks, reconciling ancient ledgers, filing paperwork from the Mesozoic era, stuff that even the interns avoided. Then came Mrs. Davison's account. Mrs. Davison was a long-term client, a sweet, elderly woman who ran a small but successful antique shop. Her account was a gold mine for the firm, and Mark, naturally, was put in charge. I was assigned to assist him. At first, it seemed like a normal assignment. We went over her records, prepared her tax filings, the usual stuff. But then Mark started making suggestions. Shady suggestions. "Maybe we can, reclassify some of these expenses," he'd say, winking. A little creative accounting never hurt anyone. I'd push back, gently at first. "Not sure that's entirely accurate, Mark. Mrs. Davison's pretty meticulous with her records." "Relax, Sarah," he'd scoff. "She's an old lady. She won't know the difference. Besides, it's just a few $1,000s. Nobody's going to notice." But I did notice, and I wasn't comfortable. The numbers just didn't add up. I told Mark my concerns, pointing out specific discrepancies in the spreadsheets. He brushed me off. "You're being paranoid, Sarah. Just trust me on this one." He even subtly threatened me. "You know, David really trusts my judgment. It'd be a shame if he started to question your abilities." I felt trapped. I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I was afraid to go over his head. I was just a junior accountant. Who would believe me over a senior partner with 15 years of experience? Then the audit came. The IRS flagged Mrs. Davison's account for review. A significant accounting error was discovered. A very significant error. The kind that could land a client in serious trouble and bring down the firm with them. I knew immediately what had happened. It was exactly what I'd warned Mark about. But when the partners started asking questions, Mark was ready. He pointed the finger directly at me. "Sarah was responsible for preparing Mrs. Davison's filings," he said, his voice dripping with faux concern. "I reviewed her work, of course, but it seems like she made a critical error in the expense calculations. I'm afraid she didn't flag it properly." I was stunned. He was actually pinning it on me. David, the CFO, looked at me with disappointment. "Sarah, is this true? Did you make this mistake?" I tried to explain, to defend myself, but Mark kept interrupting, twisting my words, painting me as incompetent and negligent. David, who already trusted Mark implicitly, seemed to believe every word. The meeting was a disaster. I was placed on probation. My reputation was tarnished. I felt humiliated and defeated. Emily was furious. "That snake, I told you he was going to do something like this. What am I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice trembling. "He's got everyone convinced it was my fault." "Fight back," Emily said, her eyes blazing with determination. "You have to prove he set you up." And that's exactly what I decided to do. It wasn't going to be easy. Mark was clever, meticulous in his own way. He'd covered his tracks well, but I was more meticulous, and I was angry. I started by secretly documenting everything. Every email, every conversation, every suspicious transaction. I kept a detailed log of Mark's behavior, noting the dates, times, and specific details of his manipulative tactics. I acted compliant and even apologetic, hoping to lull him into a false sense of security. I played the part of the contrite junior accountant, eager to learn from her mistakes. While he was distracted, I secretly copied files, saved email exchanges to a private encrypted drive, and began reconstructing Mrs. Davison's account. All those late nights and early mornings that I spent catching up because he assigned me all of the extra grunt work finally paid off. I knew where to look, and I knew how the company's system operated better than even he did. I had to be careful. If Mark suspected what I was doing, he'd bury me for good. I needed concrete evidence, something irrefutable that would expose his deception. Emily became my co-conspirator. She used her data analysis skills to help me identify patterns and anomalies in the financial records. She also started discreetly asking around, talking to other junior accountants who had worked with Mark in the past. That's when we discovered something truly disturbing. Mark had a history. Several former employees had experienced similar situations being undermined, blamed for errors they didn't commit, and ultimately forced out of the company. They were all too afraid to speak up at the time, fearing retaliation and damage to their careers. But they were willing to share their stories with Emily, off the record. Their accounts confirmed my suspicions Mark was a serial saboteur, systematically targeting younger, more competent employees to protect his own position. With the help of Emily, I pieced together my own version of the accounting error. And using my own time and resources, I was able to uncover how he manipulated the records. The pressure was mounting. The deadline for correcting Mrs. Davison's account was fast approaching. If I didn't present my evidence soon, the company would take further disciplinary action against me. I finally gathered all the proof I needed. It was risky, but I knew I had to do it. I requested a meeting with David and Brenda, the HR manager. I walked into that office, my heart pounding in my chest, armed with a laptop full of evidence. Mark was already there, smirking confidently. He clearly thought he had won. "Sarah wants to apologize for her mistake on the Davison account," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Isn't that right, Sarah?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, Mark, I'm here to present evidence that proves I didn't make the mistake. In fact, I believe you deliberately manipulated Mrs. Davison's account and then framed me for the error." Mark's smirk vanished. He looked at me with disbelief, then anger. "That's absurd. These are baseless accusations." I opened my laptop and began presenting my evidence. First, I showed the emails where I had raised concerns about Mark's proposed accounting methods and his dismissive responses. Then I had the spreadsheets and how they were changed to reflect a different truth. A forensic analysis of the documents revealed that certain entries had been altered after I had submitted them, and under his credentials. Mark tried to interrupt, to deny the evidence, but I kept talking, my voice gaining strength with each passing moment. And finally, I said, "I have the testimony of 3 former employees who experienced similar treatment from Mark. They were too afraid to speak up at the time, but they are willing to come forward now." David and Brenda looked stunned. They were clearly starting to question everything they thought they knew. I had one last piece of evidence to present. Mrs. Davison. She had been waiting outside and she was brought in to discuss the irregularities in her account. She sat down, her face etched with concern. "Mrs. Davison, can you tell us about your interactions with Sarah and Mark regarding your tax filings?" David asked gently. Mrs. Davison paused, considering her words carefully. "Well, Sarah was always very thorough and professional. She pointed out a few things that seemed a little off to me, but Mark assured me that everything was fine, that he knew what he was doing." She looked directly at Mark, her eyes filled with disappointment. "I trusted you, Mark. I've been a client of this firm for over 20 years. That was it. The final nail in Mark's coffin. His lies unraveled completely." David and Brenda realized they had been duped. They saw Mark for what he was, a manipulative bully who was willing to sacrifice anyone to protect his own ego. Mark was immediately suspended pending an investigation. I was cleared of any wrongdoing and received a profuse apology from David. The news spread like wildfire throughout the office. Everyone was talking about Mark's actions and my courage in exposing him. Emily and other colleagues offered their support and admiration. The company initiated damage control, contacting Mrs. Davison and other clients to reassure them that their accounts were being handled properly. The IT guy was called in to conduct a thorough analysis of Mark's computer activity. He uncovered even more evidence of his manipulation, including deleted emails, hidden files, and unauthorized access to other employees' accounts. A week later, Mark was fired. His career was in ruins. He was facing possible legal repercussions for his actions, including fines and damage to his professional reputation. I was offered a promotion and given more responsibility, demonstrating the company's renewed trust in my abilities. I finally felt like I was being valued for my skills and my integrity. The story doesn't end there. A few weeks after Mark's firing, a detective showed up at the office. He was investigating Mark for possible fraud and other financial crimes. It turned out his manipulation of Mrs. Davison's account was just the tip of the iceberg. He had been skimming money from other clients for years. I was interviewed by the detective, along with Mark. I recounted my experience with Mark, providing him with all the evidence I had gathered. Mark, on the other hand, denied everything, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. As I walked out of the office that day, I saw Mark being escorted into a police car. He glared at me as he passed, his face contorted with rage. I didn't feel any satisfaction, just a profound sense of sadness. Sadness for Mrs. Davison, sadness for the other victims, and sadness for Mark, who had thrown away his career and his reputation for the sake of his own ego. The detective mentioned further investigation, and as I left the office that evening, I knew the impact of Mark's betrayal would be felt for a long time to come. Not just for me, but for the entire firm. And I also knew that even with Mark gone, the feeling of unease, of uncertainty, would linger. Because once you realize that someone you trusted is capable of such deceit, it's hard to ever fully trust anyone again.